On the day I turned 60, my husband and children didn't hand me cake or candles. They handed me my execution papers, divorce papers, eviction notices. The house, the company, the life I had built, snatched away with the flick of a pen. My son sneered as if betrayal were sport. My daughter laughed like cruelty was celebration. I didn't tremble. I didn't beg. I smiled, signed, and walked out with nothing but silence. Within a single week, that silence would turn into 42 desperate calls lighting up my phone. Karma doesn't wait politely. Sometimes it storms the front door. Because betrayal this deep doesn't begin at the surface, it rots from within. That night, their voices spilled into my bedroom through the heating vent, secrets drifting up like poison smoke. Claire's laugh, sharp and careless, floated upward from my husband Victor's office. She actually thinks tomorrow's a party. My chest tightened as I pressed my ear against the grate, every word slicing deeper. From below, my son Daniel's voice followed, steady and smug. "Dad, are you sure the eviction notice is legal?" Victor's response carried no hesitation, no remorse. "We've covered everything, the business transfer, the deed, the divorce papers. By tomorrow night, your mother won't own a thing except that rusted Honda she clings to." My knees ground into the carpet, anchoring me as the people I loved most casually planned my erasure. My fingers dug into the bed frame until my knuckles went white, the wood cool and unyielding against my skin. Below, chairs scraped, papers rustled, and Daniel's voice floated upward again, cold and calculated, the way he must sound in court. "The transfer documents are airtight. She won't even realize what she's signing until it's too late. By then, it's ironclad." And then Claire again, her eagerness dripping like venom. "And Melissa's ready to move in this weekend?" Her words made my stomach turn. Melissa Hart, a name whispered in our social circle for months. A wealthy widow with a peculiar pattern, new cities, quick romances, fast takeovers. Her late husband's death had been sudden, followed by an aggressive restructuring of his company. Victor always brushed it off as rumor, but something in the timing had felt off. And now the timing was mine. "She understands the timeline," Victor answered. His voice carried a warmth I hadn't heard in years. Not when he spoke to me, but now when speaking of her. "She's already moved her things into storage downtown. Once Evelyn is out, we can start fresh." I slid away from the vent in silence, my movements cushioned by the thick carpet I had chosen years ago for its sound-dampening luxury. Ironic that the very feature I had picked for comfort now betrayed their comfort, allowing me to hear the blueprints of my own destruction. On shaking legs, I crossed to the window. Outside, the backyard stretched like a graveyard of memories. The swing set was long gone, replaced by Victor's workshop, yet I could still see ghosts of my children's laughter in the worn patch of grass that never healed. Their voices continued below, but I had heard enough. They hadn't always been like this. Victor used to seek my counsel, Daniel once clung to my every word, Claire used to draw me birthday cards in crayon. But resentment brews quietly. Maybe Victor had grown tired of building beside someone who refused to shrink. Maybe Daniel believed I never respected his legal skills, only his potential. And Claire, she mistook my protection for control. Melissa didn't have to work hard to manipulate them. She only had to amplify what was already festering. For months, my family had orchestrated my downfall, while I kept their world spinning. That very morning, I had reviewed contracts, scheduled deliveries, and balanced the company's books. tasks my son Daniel was supposed to oversee. Betrayal had been living in my house like a guest I never noticed. I opened the closet and pulled down the overnight suitcase reserved for business trips. My hands moved on instinct, folding clothes, selecting relics that belonged to me before all of this. My mother's pearl necklace, the watch I bought with my first paycheck, a photo album from college back when Victor wasn't even a footnote in my story. Downstairs, the house shifted, doors opened, footsteps spread like soldiers taking their positions. Victor's heavy stride carried him toward the kitchen. Daniel's lighter steps led to the front door, likely returning to that downtown apartment I had once co-signed for because his credit wasn't good enough. Claire's heels clicked toward the garage where her gleaming BMW waited, the car Victor and I had gifted her after graduate school, back when I still believed gratitude would follow generosity. I tucked the suitcase back into the closet, smoothed my expression into routine, and descended the stairs with practiced normalcy. Victor stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into his favorite mug, the one with a hairline crack Daniel had given him years ago. When he looked up, something flickered across his face. Guilt? Anticipation? Whatever it was, it vanished before I could catch it. "Morning plans?" I asked lightly, sliding my own mug from the cabinet. "Just paperwork in the office," he replied, eyes darting away. "Tomorrow's a big day." "Your birthday." The words landed between us like a loaded weapon on the table. 60 years old, and apparently the perfect milestone for erasure. I poured cream into my coffee, watching it swirl into the darkness until it disappeared. "I suppose that's worth celebrating," I murmured. "We have something special planned." His smile didn't reach his eyes. It hadn't for months. When had I stopped noticing? The morning stretched on with its familiar rhythm, but everything felt fractured, wrong, as though every clock in the house ticked toward betrayal. At the warehouse, Carlos met me at the door, his face tight with concern. 3 pallets are missing. Cameras went dark the same night. That was all I needed to hear. The rest I would learn later. I rested a hand on his shoulder, this man who had stood by us since the very beginning. "I know, Carlos. Don't worry, just document everything." He blinked in confusion, unable to understand why I wasn't furious. How could I explain that stolen wood and marble were the smallest thefts in my world? My family wasn't just dismantling inventory, they were dismantling me. The rest of the day passed in a surreal blur. Every interaction with them was a performance. Scripts rehearsed, smiles forced. I matched their act while documenting every crack. Inside, my mind sharpened. I wasn't the victim in their play. I was the audience waiting for the curtain drop. That evening, I cooked Victor's favorite meal with calm precision while he worked in his office below. Through the vent, his voice drifted upward, low, intimate, speaking not to me, but to Melissa. Tomorrow they would hand me papers disguised as a birthday celebration. Tomorrow they would watch me surrender everything I had built. Tonight they believed I was oblivious, content, blind. Let them think so. Tomorrow they would meet the other side of silence. My phone sat on the counter, 3 numbers already programmed, like secret weapons waiting to be drawn. Margaret West, forensic accountant. James Alcott, corporate attorney. Detective Ryan Mercer, still asking questions about my former partner's mysterious death 8 years ago. I plated the meal with a genuine smile. For the first time all day, they thought tomorrow would be their grand finale. They didn't know it was just my opening act. Morning came with Victor at my bedside, holding a steaming mug of coffee, his hands trembling as liquid sloshed dangerously near the rim. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he said, his voice stiff, rehearsed. "Wear your blue dress today, the one from our anniversary dinner." That dress still hung in the closet, its tag intact. We never had that dinner. Victor claimed a construction emergency, though the restaurant receipt I found later told a different story. Table for two. I slipped into the silk now, its cool fabric clinging to my skin, and caught Victor watching me from the doorway. His foot tapped against the hardwood floor, a nervous rhythm I had memorized over 3 decades. He thought tomorrow belonged to him. He had no idea tomorrow belonged to me. Walking down the stairs that morning felt like descending into an execution chamber. The familiar family photos lining the wall seemed to glare at me, their frozen smiles knowing too much. At the bottom, the living room had been rearranged, our furniture shoved to the edges, leaving the mahogany coffee table stranded in the center like an altar awaiting sacrifice. The sunlight caught on a thick manila folder placed squarely in the middle, its edges glowing like a verdict waiting to be read. Daniel stood by the front door, shoulders squared, his courtroom suit too polished for a Saturday morning. His phone was raised, angled perfectly to record. Claire leaned against the hallway wall, her own phone pointed at me, lips curled in a small, cruel smile. They had formed a triangle around me, with Victor at the apex. I was the centerpiece, surrounded. "Please sit, Evelyn," Victor said, gesturing to a kitchen chair they had dragged into place. Not my spot, not the chair where I'd sipped thousands of morning coffees. This one was cold, hard, deliberately chosen. A stage prop for humiliation. The wood chilled me through the silk dress as Daniel stepped forward. His voice shifted into lawyer mode, that hollow performance tone I had heard him use with clients. "Mother, we need to discuss changes to the family structure and business arrangements. What you're about to see is the product of careful consideration and legal consultation." Victor opened the folder, papers spread across the table, with trembling hands. Yellow tabs screamed from every page, signature here, sign away there. A lifetime condensed into lines of ink. "The first document dissolves the marriage," Daniel continued, words sliding out with practiced ease. His eyes never met mine, fixed instead on some imaginary point above my head. "You'll retain your personal belongings and the Honda. The second acknowledges a voluntary reallocation of your ownership stake in the company, effective upon signing and contingent upon prior undisclosed terms. He third waives marital interest in this property, citing Victor's sole maintenance and financial input as primary claim." Each phrase hit like a hammer, blunt and calculated, but it was Victor who tried for the killing blow. "We've grown apart, Evelyn. This is best for everyone. A chance for new chapters." His voice faltered, as though even he didn't believe his script. Then he added, too quickly, "Melissa has been helping us navigate this transition. She understands what we need moving forward." Claire stepped in next, her voice sharpened to a knife's edge. "We've already moved your things to the garage, Mom." "The things that are actually yours. Everything else was Dad's money anyway." She lowered her phone just long enough to stab me with her stare. "It's all labeled, sorted, ready for you to take." Silence swelled in the room, alive, suffocating. Through the window, I caught the neighbors staging their curiosity. Mrs. Patterson watering flowers that didn't need water. Tom from next door checking his mailbox for the 3rd time that morning. They had been warned or invited, witnesses to my public dismantling. "You're pathetic, Mom," Claire said finally, her words slicing through the quiet. "Did you really think we needed you?" "Dad built the business. Daniel has the legal skills. I have my own life. What do you even contribute, besides existing like some robot on repeat?" Daniel chuckled, quick and sharp, a sound I had never heard from my son. Victor followed, his laugh high-pitched, brittle, the sound of a man already lost, but pretending he wasn't. The walls of the house I had built with love echoed their cruelty back at me. Then movement. From the kitchen emerged Marcus West, Daniel's law school friend, briefcase clutched like armor. He had eaten at this table 100 times and now stood as an official witness. "I'm here to verify the signatures are voluntary and without coercion," he announced, unnecessary formality dripping from his tone. Victor produced a pen, heavy and gleaming, the Mont Blanc I had once gifted him when he landed our first contract. He held it out to me with the same hand that had once held mine through births, funerals, and 1,000 quiet Tuesdays. I took it. Its weight was final. What they didn't know was that the night before my birthday, I charged the old iPhone I kept in my suitcase, the one Daniel had forgotten I used during the early days of the company. Its cracked screen and outdated OS made it a relic, but the camera worked fine. I slipped it beneath a stack of folders in my purse, camera lens angled outward, voice memo already recording. It wasn't high-tech, but it didn't need to be. Just a quiet witness. The room froze as I drew the first paper toward me. Daniel shifted, angling his phone for the perfect shot. Claire zoomed in. Victor's breathing grew loud, uneven. My signature flowed steady across the first yellow tab, then the second, then the third, each letter carved in the careful script my mother once demanded I master. Signatures that used to mean promises. Promises that used to mean something. Back when signatures meant promises and promises still meant something, I had signed contracts with hope in my veins. But that morning, my hand moved with the same steady grace as I signed away everything I had built. The house where my children learned to walk. The business I had helped grow from a single truck into an empire. 32 years of marriage, reduced to ink on a page, signed with the same hand that had once written my wedding vows. The final signature slid into place. I set the pen down with a soft click against the mahogany table. The sound rang louder than any scream could have. I lifted my eyes, meeting each of theirs in turn. Daniel's gaze held triumph laced with unease, as if he wasn't entirely convinced of his own victory. Claire lowered her phone slightly, processing my calmness like it was an alien language. And Victor, he actually stepped backward, his body recoiling, bracing for an explosion that never came. Instead, I smiled, a real smile, one that reached my eyes and softened my face into something they hadn't seen in years, peace, that terrified them more than rage ever could. "Thank you," I whispered, rising with deliberate grace. "This makes everything so much simpler." My composure stayed intact until I closed the door of my old Honda. The engine coughed, then roared to life on the third try, same as it had for 15 years. With 2 suitcases and a silence heavy as drowning, I drove away from the ashes of my old life. 12 miles later, I pulled into the parking lot of an extended stay hotel, far enough that no familiar eyes would see my car. The clerk didn't look twice when I laid cash on the counter. Room 214 smelled of bleach and broken dreams, but it had a lock on the door and a bed I didn't have to share, with a man plotting my burial. I dropped my suitcases by the door, slid my phone into airplane mode, and pried out the SIM card. They'd expect me to call someone, to rage, to weep, to beg for answers. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. My silence would be my weapon. First, though, I needed intelligence. Back in the hotel, I retrieved the old phone from my purse and uploaded the footage. Each page they forced under my pen was now saved, recorded frame by frame as I had pretended to skim. Their arrogance had relied on my ignorance. They never imagined I'd be watching every word through a second lens. Daniel's legalese was meticulous but arrogant. He had buried traps in subsections, assuming I'd skim like a distracted housewife. But one clause caught my attention, a non-compete agreement barring me from construction within a 500-mile radius. Unenforceable by state law. They thought they'd caged me, not realizing I already knew where the bars bent. My notebook filled quickly. 2 columns, assets they knew about and assets they didn't. The account I'd opened 3 years ago, fattened with $40,000 from side projects, Victor dismissed as trivial. The storage unit under my maiden name, stuffed with my mother's antiques, the suppliers who preferred dealing with me directly, bypassing the family front. By midnight, I was ready. The hotel's business center phone felt cold in my hands. I called 3 people, a forensic accountant, a corporate attorney, and an old detective. Within 24 hours, they were on my side, and my war room was operational. By dawn, my burner email account was already flooded. 53 new messages, 17 missed calls sat on my phone, even though it was powered off. Desperation had a way of leaking through cracks. Most of the emails were from Carlos, loyal, steady Carlos, who had been at the warehouse at 5:30 every morning for 12 years. I called him from the hotel phone. He answered on the first ring. Mrs. R, thank God. Everything's going crazy here. Mr. R showed up at 4 with that Hart woman. Made me reset every password, said you were on medical leave. His voice dropped to a whisper. She was measuring the offices, talking renovations. Carlos, listen carefully, I said. Do exactly what they ask. Don't resist, but document everything, every change, every visitor, every order, quietly. Can you do that without drawing attention? You gave me a chance when nobody else would, he said. I don't forget that. The next 2 hours delivered a flood of intelligence. 3 major clients had called him directly, furious over restructuring emails Daniel had sent, with sudden price hikes. 2 suppliers reported Nathan, through forged directives, had unilaterally stretched payment terms from 30 days to 90. On the Anderson project, premium-grade stone had been swapped for inferior material. But the most damning news came from somewhere unexpected. Nancy Palmer, who ran the cafe where Victor often met clients, tracked me down at the hotel's main line. Honey, she said, her voice taut with concern. I don't know what's going on, but your husband's been meeting Melissa Hart every Tuesday and Thursday for over a year. Always the corner booth, always acting like no one noticed. She paused, then added, and my cousin Linda works at the courthouse. Melissa's been there 3 times in the last month filing paperwork. Same type of filings she made before her second husband died. Linda remembers because it was odd, getting everything squared away just months before his sudden heart attack. The pieces fell into place so sharply it made my chest tighten. Victor hadn't simply strayed or grown restless. He had been targeted, selected, groomed. Melissa Hart wasn't a mistress. She was a predator. She didn't just steal companies, she eliminated their owners after securing control. I made one last call that morning, this time to Sarah Morales, the private investigator James had once recommended. Her fee was steep, but when I mentioned Melissa's name, her voice shifted. "That woman's got a reputation," Sarah warned. "I'll need a retainer. But I'll have a background file to you tomorrow. Just understand something. If even half the whispers I've heard are true, this isn't divorce you're dealing with. It's permanent removal." The hotel room had transformed into a war room. Papers covered the bed, documents marked with notes in red ink. My laptop hummed with accounts Victor didn't know existed. Phone numbers of allies were scribbled across the notepad, ready for deployment. They thought they'd stripped me bare, left me broken. But all they had really done was cut the last chains holding me back. At 7 the next morning, Margaret arrived. She carried 2 laptops and a heavy box of files that landed on the desk with a thud. Her sharp eyes scanned the papers I had spread across the bed, and for the first time I saw genuine alarm cross her face. 90 minutes later, her verdict dropped like a gavel. 3 years, she said, her fingers moving fast across a calculator. They've been bleeding the company for 3 years. Evelyn, the patterns are obvious once you know where to look. She turned her screen toward me. Spreadsheets told the story. Fake vendors siphoning money. Legitimate expenses padded by 30%. The extra funneled offshore. Materials ordered, never delivered, written off as phantom losses. The total flashed on her screen. My stomach churned. 1.2 million, possibly closer to 2. Stolen systematically, while I had been too busy keeping the daily fires out to see the inferno building beneath my feet. "Nathan's fingerprints are everywhere," Margaret said, her voice clipped as she tapped through spreadsheets. "Every fraudulent transfer, every buried clause. He used his law firm's credibility like camouflage, authorizing movements that would crumble under even a basic audit." She clicked again, her eyes narrowing. "And here, look at this. 6 months ago, your daughter sold 3 excavators and a crane for half their worth. The buyer, a shell company tied to her art gallery." My chest tightened. That gallery, Claire's pride, the space we toasted with champagne and parental pride, was built on the bones of stolen equipment. Every exhibition, every opening night, funded by machinery her grandfather had once paid for with scraped knuckles and calloused hands. But Margaret wasn't done. She pulled up another file. "This one's the most damning. Melissa Hart's name appears on your business account. Signature cards 2 weeks before your birthday. Before the divorce papers, they were so confident you'd sign, they'd already started the transfer." My phone buzzed, a text from Carlos. "Need to talk in person, urgent." We met at a diner 5 miles from the warehouse, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and burnt coffee. I sat where I could watch the door. Carlos slid into the seat opposite me, eyes darting, shoulders tense. "Mrs. R, I stayed late last night, pretended I was finishing inventory. Around 9, Victor showed up with her." He pulled out his phone, thumb shaking as he opened a recording app. I caught this. The audio was grainy, but the voices unmistakable. Victor's voice first. "Once the divorce is finalized, we can liquidate assets more aggressively." Then Melissa, her tone ice-cold, clinical. "The timeline is critical. We need her completely removed from decision-making. If she interferes, we'll handle it. I've handled obstacles before." Carlos leaned closer, whispering, "There's more." "The cameras? Someone wiped footage from 3 nights this month. But they didn't know about the backup drive I installed in the ceiling. I have everything. On a thumb drive, Carlos had saved video of Victor and Melissa photographing client lists, contracts, supplier agreements. One frame froze me, Melissa on her phone, pointing at our database on the office computer. The timestamp, 2:47 a.m., 3 weeks before my birthday. They're planning to gut the company, Carlos said, his voice hollow. Sell it piece by piece. I even heard her mention buyers in Phoenix. They'll take the contracts, not the employees. Everyone will be out. I was still processing when my phone rang again. Detective Mercer. His voice was sharp. Can you come to the precinct now? What I've found, we need to discuss it immediately. His office hadn't changed in 8 years, still buried in files and half-empty coffee cups. But his expression had hardened. He spread photographs across his desk. Patricia's first husband died at 48. Heart attack, her second, Robert, at 52. Both cremated within 48 hours. Unusual, but not illegal. But here's what we missed. He pointed at 2 documents. Both men increased their life insurance policies 6 months before their deaths. Both named her beneficiary. Both showed identical symptoms in the final weeks: fatigue, shortness of breath, chest pain. Classic signs of digitalis poisoning. Looks like a heart attack, but it isn't. He turned his monitor toward me. Your husband increased his policy last month, $2 million. Melissa is listed as secondary beneficiary, after you. Once the divorce finalizes, she becomes primary. The air in the office grew heavy. We also recovered deleted texts from a phone Patricia thought was destroyed. She and Victor discussed permanent solutions and timeline adjustments. The obstacle? That's you. The walls closed in. This wasn't just fraud. This wasn't just betrayal. It was murder, rehearsed like a business plan. On my drive back, another call came through. Michael Anderson, one of our biggest clients. His voice thundered with anger. Evelyn, Nathan missed our meeting, then sent substandard materials to my site. My foreman had to reject the delivery. Your name's on that contract. That lumber could have caused catastrophic failure. And now I hear you're no longer with the company. Is it true? It's complicated, Michael. Then uncomplicate it. I hired you for your reputation. If you're starting something new, I want in. We can transfer the contract if you're in charge. Within the hour, 2 more clients called with the same story. Nathan's arrogance and Claire's shortcuts were detonating the reputation I had spent 20 years building. One of her substitutions had already caused a partial collapse on a site. No injuries this time, but the liability could bury them. By nightfall, I had 3 file boxes of evidence. Margaret had traced offshore accounts. Detective Mercer had built a case that would trigger federal involvement. Carlos had footage proving premeditation. Sarah Morales's preliminary file linked Melissa to 2 more suspicious deaths in other states. The woman who walked out of her home with nothing but memories was gone. In her place stood something sharper, harder. They thought they had disposed of a worn-out wife and mother. What they had actually created was their worst nightmare. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. The file boxes in my hotel room sat like loaded weapons, silent but primed, waiting for the moment I'd pull the trigger. Timing would decide everything, whether my evidence annihilated them or only wounded them enough to strike back. Each dawn brought another dispatch from Carlos, confirming what I already knew. Without me, the empire I'd built was eating itself alive. Delays, walkouts, safety breaches, each day brought a new failure. I logged every detail in a leather journal: dates, times, consequences. Each line gave me something to anchor myself to, besides the crater in my chest where my family used to live. 32 years of marriage reduced to evidence exhibits. 2 children I'd raised turned into co-conspirators in my erasure. A soft, persistent knock came at 3 that afternoon. Through the peephole, I saw Rebecca Stanton, my mentor from 20 years ago, when I was just starting in the construction industry. She stood in the hallway, raincoat dripping, eyes steady with concern. I opened the door. "I know you're in here," she said simply. "We need to talk." Rebecca stepped inside without judgment, scanning the boxes and pinned documents with the practiced gaze of a woman who had built an empire from worse wreckage. She'd started Stanton Construction with a single truck after her own divorce and turned it into the largest firm in 3 states. "Word travels fast in our industry," she said, settling into the uncomfortable hotel chair like it was her throne. "Nathan Rivers called me yesterday, trying to poach my contracts." Thought flashing his father's name meant something. She gave a sharp smile. "I told him I only work with professionals who know the difference between rebar and regret." Despite everything, I almost smiled back. "I'm here with an offer, Evelyn. Not charity, business." She placed a folder on the desk. "I need someone who understands quality control, client relationships, project management. Someone who can take over our commercial division while I focus on government contracts." I opened the folder. Full partnership track. Corner office in the Meridian building. It overlooked my old headquarters. A front row seat to watch them fail while I rebuilt. The salary she quoted was double what I'd ever drawn from my own company. The benefits, car allowance, expense account, profit sharing, were things I'd never allowed myself to want. But it was the project list that made my breath catch. Every client who'd called me about Nathan's incompetence was already inquiring about transferring their contracts to Stanton Construction. "Take your time," Rebecca said. "A week, maybe 2. Though I should mention, the Anderson project specifically requested your involvement. Apparently there was an incident with substandard materials. Nearly caused a structural collapse. After she left, the room felt charged with a new kind of energy. Possibility. I still needed groceries, though, and the hotel's mini-mart prices were outrageous. I'd been living on vending machine coffee for too long. The supermarket on Riverside Drive was far enough from my old haunts to feel safe. I was comparing pasta prices, lost in thought, when a hand clamped down on my upper arm. Victor grabbed my arm in the supermarket aisle, wild-eyed and whispering about Melissa. His panic was real, but so was the black Mercedes idling at the curb. I walked straight to the cafe, called the detective, and disappeared out the back. Detective Mercer answered on the first ring. "Melissa Hart is at Riverside Market," I said quickly. "She's not alone." The man with her looks dangerous. Victor just approached me, panicked. "Stay in public spaces," Mercer ordered. "I'm sending a unit now." Through the cafe window, I watched Victor cross the lot toward Melissa's car. She rolled down the window. Even from a distance, I saw the shift in her face, from charming mask to venomous fury. Victor stepped back, hands raised. The man climbed out, posture deliberate, predatory. Then sirens split the air. Melissa and her companion slid back into the Mercedes and peeled away before the cruisers arrived. An hour later, Mercer called back. "We missed them, but we ran her plates. This morning she was at the university library pulling medical journals." specifically of plant-based toxins that mimic cardiac failure. She's escalating. That night, I sat at the small hotel desk, surrounded by 12 thick manila envelopes, each one a weapon, each one labeled with its destination. The IRS would get evidence of tax fraud. The state attorney general would receive proof of embezzlement. The construction board would see safety violations and substandard material reports. Her insurance carriers would find an ugly trail of beneficiary payouts. But the masterpiece was addressed to Channel 7's investigative reporter, Dana Chin. Enough evidence to spark a firestorm, but not everything. I held back the most devastating pieces, saving them for the moment Victor tried to paint me as incompetent. Every envelope carried a different shard of truth, alone, incomplete, together, inescapable. Copies were stashed in cloud storage under different aliases. Physical duplicates rested in a bank deposit box, registered to a name no one connected to me. The 12th envelope was different. It held a single photograph, Victor and Melissa at the warehouse at 2:47 a.m., and a handwritten note, "I know everything, your move." That one would be delivered by courier directly to Melissa Hart tomorrow, 6 hours after the others hit their destinations. Let her sweat, let her scramble, let her choke on the cracks in her perfect plan. The rain had stopped by the time I left the desk, the parking lot glistening under the street lamps. Somewhere across town, my family was probably sleeping soundly in the beds I'd chosen, in the rooms I'd decorated, smug in their illusion of victory. Dawn on day 12 found me at the post office counter, watching as 11 certified envelopes vanished into the system, each one stamped with a tracking number I carefully recorded. The 12th, Melissa's personal warning, was set for courier delivery at precisely 2 p.m., a 6-hour head start for official investigations. By the time I walked into Rebecca Stanton's office for my first unofficial day of work, justice was already grinding forward. She had given me a temporary office on the executive floor, a glass-walled perch overlooking the city's construction district. From my window, I could see the headquarters of Rivers Construction, the company I had built from nothing. At 9:47 a.m., 3 unmarked federal vehicles rolled into their parking lot. Agents in dark suits poured out, carrying boxes and warrant folders, moving with quiet efficiency. Through Rebecca's telescope, I watched employees crowd windows, their confusion visible even from blocks away. At 10:15 a.m., my phone, silent for nearly 2 weeks, erupted into a storm of calls. The first call came from Victor. I let it slide to voicemail. "Evelyn, something's happening. The IRS just froze our accounts. They're saying fraudulent tax filings. This has to be a mistake. Call me immediately." 5 minutes later, another message. His voice higher now, edges fraying. "The state attorney general's office is here. They've got a warrant. They're seizing computers. Evelyn, whatever you think happened, this isn't the way. Please." At 10:32 a.m., Daniel's first voicemail arrived. His tone was clipped, lawyerly, but beneath it I heard something else, fear. "Mother, I don't know what you've done, but you're destroying everything grandfather built. We can resolve this privately. As your son and as your attorney, I'm advising you to contact me immediately." By noon, the voicemails had shifted into chaos. Victor's voice lurched from confusion to rage to raw panic. "They found the offshore accounts." "How did you even know about the offshore accounts?" "Patricia says you must have been spying illegally." "We'll fight this, Evelyn. You won't win." Daniel's threats dissolved into pleading. The construction board is threatening to revoke our license. 3 projects just canceled. Mom, please, let's be rational. We can work something out. But it was Claire's message that cut deepest. Her once arrogant voice cracked with fear. Mom, they've seized my gallery. They said it was bought with embezzled money. I don't understand. I don't even have an apartment. It was in the company's name. My cards don't work. Mom, I don't know how to. I've never had to. Please, please call me. By 3 p.m., there were 42 calls in total. I saved every voicemail, archived them across multiple devices. Evidence of their unraveling, evidence of panic. At 2:03, the courier confirmed Patricia's envelope had been hand-delivered. By 2:47, Sarah Morales' investigator sent photographs that exceeded even my expectations. Patricia stood on her penthouse balcony, shrieking as she hurled Victor's suits into the air. Fine wool and silk fluttered down the street like surrender flags. Neighbors gawked from balconies as she screamed loud enough to rattle windows. She found the photos, Sarah explained over the phone. The ones of Victor with those other women. He thought he was playing her, but she was playing him. Now she's tearing his life apart in broad daylight. The investigator's footage captured Victor arriving, looking up as the clothing rained down. Then a laptop crashed onto the pavement inches from his feet. A security guard blocked him from entering as Patricia's voice tore through the lobby, shrill and venomous. She emerged moments later, wielding scissors, threatening to carve up his car. Security restrained her as Victor fled. To a motel, Sarah added. Highway 9, same one you're in. He's 3 doors down. The irony was almost poetic. The man who had orchestrated my exile now lived in the same cheap box, eating the same stale vending machine snacks, marinating in the same realization that control had slipped through his hands forever. Rebecca and I spent that afternoon visiting clients. The Anderson meeting was the most satisfying. Michael Anderson spread architectural plans across his desk, his voice firm. Evelyn, I'm glad you're here. Nathan threatened legal action this morning if I broke contract. 20 minutes later, I heard federal investigators raided their offices. I want Thompson Construction on this project immediately, with you personally overseeing it. We visited 6 clients that day. All 6 signed transfer agreements on the spot. Contracts worth more than $8 million, more than Rivers Construction had made in an entire year. Carlos called as we drove back. His voice carried both exhaustion and hope. Mrs. R., it's chaos. 17 workers already quit. The rest are sending out resumes. Nathan tried to run a safety meeting, but he didn't even know the basics. Someone called OSHA. They're coming Monday. Thompson Construction needs a warehouse manager. Same crew, better pay, actual safety standards. Interested? His relief was audible when I said yes. By nightfall, Rebecca and I had hired 12 of Rivers Construction's best employees, secured 4 major contracts, and set a transition plan to have Anderson's project back on track within a week. We celebrated with coffee in her office, watching the last government vehicle pull out of the Rivers Construction lot. You know the beautiful part? Rebecca asked, eyes fixed through her telescope. You didn't destroy them. You just removed yourself. The fraud, the theft, the incompetence, it was always there. You were just the foundation holding it together. My phone buzzed again. Text number 43, from Victor. Victor's final text arrived just after midnight. Patricia knows about the other women. She's threatening to go to the police about something. I don't know what you've started, but it's destroying everything. I deleted it without hesitation. His panic no longer concerned me. Tomorrow, the world would know. By evening, Dana Chin's investigative report would air, exposing the fraud, the safety violations, the federal raids. By week's end, Rivers Construction would be nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Another empire toppled by its own greed. But that night, I sat in my temporary office, overlooking the skyline I had once helped shape, building by building. Tomorrow, I would sign my contract with Stanton Construction. Tomorrow, I would begin again, on my own terms. The phone rang. Call number 44. This time, the number flashed from the motel's front desk. Victor, no doubt, clawing for one more chance to beg through a borrowed line. I let it ring. Then I packed my bag and checked into a different hotel across town. 20 miles of distance. A gulf he would never close. I was unpacking fresh office supplies when the television clicked on to Dana Chin's live report. Her serious expression filled the screen as she stood outside Rivers Construction's headquarters. Behind her, workers stripped the bronze letters from the facade. Each one fell into the back of a truck with a hollow clang, as if the company itself were being dismantled piece by piece. Tonight, we investigate the sudden collapse of one of the region's most trusted construction companies. Following federal raids and multiple arrests, Dana intoned. My phone buzzed with a message from Detective Mercer. Turn to Channel 5. You'll want to see this live. I switched channels. The footage cut to the Highway 9 motel. Federal agents escorted Victor out in handcuffs, his once pristine suit replaced by rumpled clothes. His head hung low as cameras captured every second. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m., exactly 3 weeks since my birthday ambush. The reporter's voiceover was merciless. Victor Rivers, founder of Rivers Construction, arrested on charges of tax evasion, fraud, and conspiracy. The feed shifted to downtown, Nathan's law firm. Through the glass doors, agents carried boxes past shocked associates. Nathan stood frozen at the reception desk, while senior partners, his former admirers, backed away as if his disgrace might stain them. His arrest was staged in the open, a golden boy dragged into the gutter before the very people who once applauded his ruthlessness. Claire's arrest was quieter, but no less final. Her gallery was sealed in yellow tape, seizure notices plastered across the glass she had so carefully arranged. They found her in the back office, surrounded by art she could no longer sell, whispering disbelief as agents led her away. Then came the crescendo. Melissa Hart. News helicopters circled her penthouse as federal agents battered at her door. Her shrieks echoed over live microphones, screaming about conspiracies, rights, betrayal. Cameras captured her being dragged out in silk and stilettos, her perfect hair in disarray. The reporter noted that additional charges were being prepared. 2 dead husbands were about to be pulled back into the light. As the broadcast continued, Mercer called again. His voice was steady, almost grimly satisfied. Evelyn, I need you at the station tomorrow morning. There are things you need to see. The next day, his office carried a different weight. The exhaustion that had haunted his face for years was gone, replaced by the hard certainty of a man holding answers. He spread files across the desk, each one stamped with names I recognized. The texts we pulled are damning, he said. Patricia and Victor discussed your removal in detail. The birthday ambush was step 1, to destabilize you, to make you vulnerable. Patricia sourced digitalis from a contact in Mexico. The plan was to wait 3 months, then invite you to a reconciliation dinner. My stomach turned, but Mercer wasn't finished. Here's the irony, Mercer said, sliding another file across his desk. Melissa was already planning Victor's death, about 8 months down the line. She had the transfer documents drafted. Your husband thought he was the predator, but he was always her prey. He showed me a recovered message from her phone to an unknown number. E is easier to manage than expected. Once A is handled, we'll need 6 to 8 months before his heart attack. The contracts alone are worth $8 million. Mercer leaned back. Your walking away disrupted everything. Without you to blame for the collapse, she couldn't play savior. When the investigation began, she panicked, moved too fast, made mistakes. Your silence saved your life, maybe even his. When I returned to Stanton Construction's offices, my permanent corner office was waiting. Glass walls overlooking the entire construction district. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched as workers posted a foreclosure notice on the house I had once designed with such naive hope. They were careful, almost reverent, as if they understood the weight of what they were pinning to the door. Throughout the day, familiar faces arrived one by one. Carlos brought his entire warehouse team. The Anderson foreman convinced his best crews to follow. Even Maria, the receptionist who had greeted me at Brennan Construction for 15 years, now sat at Stanton's front desk. You gave us dignity, she told me, eyes wet. You could have left us to sink with them, but you didn't. The mail came at 3. 3 envelopes forwarded from the hotel. The first, Daniel's handwriting, shaky, jagged. Mom, I need money for commissary. They're threatening my bar license. The other inmates know I'm a lawyer. It's not safe, please. The second, Claire's, 3 pages, ink smeared by tears. I never learned anything real, Mom. I thought money would always be there. I can't even wash dishes properly. I'm 26 and I'm starting from 0. The third, typed on official letterhead, from Victor's public defender. My client maintains Patricia Hart manipulated the entire situation. He claims he was coerced into divorce proceedings and unaware of criminal activity. He requests character testimony regarding his years as a law-abiding citizen. I opened a new folder in my cabinet and labeled it Birthday Gifts in permanent marker. Each letter went inside, not out of cruelty, but as evidence. They had handed me divorce papers for my 60th birthday. The universe had returned the favor with arrest warrants for theirs. That evening, I stood in my office as the sun set over the city. The Brennan Construction sign was gone, only ghost letters staining the facade. Tomorrow, demolition crews would strip it bare. Rebecca joined me at the window, pressing a cup of tea into my hands. "Any regrets?" she asked softly. I thought about it, watching the last light fade over the skyline of my new life. They taught me something. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes the best revenge is stepping back, letting them destroy themselves, while you build something stronger from their ashes. The television hummed in the corner, looping footage of the arrests, additional charges piling daily. The board revoking their license, the IRS seizing what was left. Melissa under investigation for 2 more deaths. Justice had arrived exactly 3 weeks after my birthday, wearing handcuffs and carrying federal warrants. 6 months later, the sunrise was the same, but everything it touched had changed. My apartment was smaller, but mine. The photos on the wall told the real story. Contracts signed, clients won, friends reclaimed. At the ceremony, I became partner in name and truth. Victor wrote from prison. I filed the letter away, another birthday gift I hadn't asked for. My phone rang. Margaret. Lunch plans. Our college friendship, once distant, was now rekindled and fortified by fire. We met weekly, proof that starting over at 60 wasn't a consolation prize, it was a gift. That afternoon, Stanton Construction would host a partnership ceremony. Rebecca had insisted on formality, inviting clients and industry leaders to witness my transition from employee to equal. And this time, my name would be carved into the foundation. The contracts were already signed, every clause read twice this time. Rebecca knew the value of public recognition, and the conference room was filled with people who had witnessed both my destruction and my rebirth. Michael Anderson arrived early, his wife pulling me aside to whisper her admiration. 3 other major clients attended, men and women who had left Brennan Construction behind to put their trust in me. Even the inspector who had flagged Nathan's violations shook my hand with genuine respect. Rebecca took the podium, her voice carrying across the room with the authority of someone who had clawed her way up from nothing. 6 months ago, this company gained something invaluable: integrity in human form. Evelyn Carter rebuilt herself and our commercial division simultaneously, securing $8 million in new contracts while maintaining a perfect safety record. Today, she becomes my equal partner at Stanton Construction, though she has always been my equal in every way that matters. The applause washed over me, different from any recognition I had ever known. This was not reflected glory from a husband or borrowed pride from children. This was mine. The champagne tasted sweeter because I had bought it myself. That evening, a letter arrived from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Victor's number stamped in the corner. Inside was a visitation request. Please, one conversation before my transfer. There are things you need to know about the children. 3 days later, I sat across from him through reinforced glass. The man who had once stood over me, orchestrating my erasure, now looked 20 years older, swallowed by an orange jumpsuit. His hands shook as he lifted the phone. "They're struggling," he said. "Nathan's looking at 18 months if he cooperates. Sophia's in a halfway house. They're just kids, Evelyn. They stopped being my children when they laughed at my pain." His face broke, desperate, pleading. Doesn't 32 years count for anything? It counted for everything, I told him. That's why the betrayal was complete. I hung up the phone, leaving him behind in the echo of his own desperation, the same tone I had once carried in my chest the morning they ambushed me. Now it was his burden to bear. Weeks later, I hired Jennifer, Nathan's discarded ex-wife, as an assistant. Nervous but determined, she slowly began to rebuild her confidence. Watching her rise, where he had only diminished her, felt like balance being restored to the universe. The news eventually stopped covering the scandal. Victor received 7 years. Patricia, life without parole, linked to 4 murders across 3 states. Nathan got 2 years and permanent disbarment. Sophia, probation, and community service. I kept their letters in the folder marked birthday gifts, not out of cruelty, but as reminders. They thought divorce papers and eviction notices would end me. Instead, they freed me to build something better. And as the night deepened beyond the glass, I couldn't help but wonder what new stories were already unfolding, waiting for their own reckoning.